House of Ramirez does not do sports, politics, or religion. However, understanding that the city elections are this year and how impactful and important it is for all of us Atlantans, I have decided to open my platform to politics, to give a fair shot to each running candidate to tell their story. This conversation needed to happen, and we are having the conversation for the love of community. Hey guys, this is House of Ramirez. You already know what's up. We out here in Atlanta representing, and I do it big. I spotlight big entrepreneurs and successful individuals that are doing very important things in our communities. And I don't do politics, I don't do sports, I don't do religion, but this time it's different. I've opened up my platform to allow candidates to speak their mind freely and tell us who they are and tell us their story. So without wasting any more time, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce a neighbor, a sister, and a friend, Miss Liliana. If you can, please tell us who you are and where you are from for our audience that doesn't know you yet.
Leslie, thank you for putting this all together, because I know it takes a lot of time. But yeah, so I know it takes a lot of time. So I'm Liliana Bakhtiari. I am from Atlanta. So I was born at Piedmont Hospital. I grew up in Gwinnett because that's where where my family's immigrant community lived. But I was always in downtown Atlanta with my dad because my parents couldn't afford childcare. So I was usually over at Grady or at Lenox with my mom because she's a dental hygienist. And then my dad opened up his own pharmacy downtown in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood where it still is today. So I grew up working down there with him and in shelters around Atlanta. So went to school in Gwinnett, but spent a lot of time working in downtown Atlanta with my dad.
Wow, I did not know that. Girl, you're a Gwinnetian? You're a fellow Gwinnetian too? Get the fuck out of here. How did I not know this? Yo, I was talking to somebody else and they were from Gwinnett. We actually went to the same high school. I went to 2 high schools. So my biological parents, they're immigrants from Mexico, and I stand proud on that shit because their sacrifice got me to where I'm at now, and I can help others. But we hopped around a lot and we struggled. And I went to 2 high schools, and I realized that young man I was talking to went to high school with me, which is crazy. But anywho, yeah, that's phenomenal. Just to have somebody that's from the same neighborhood, same area that you're from, and we walk life differently, but it's amazing to see that your parents gave you those morals, those ethics that you need for life that you actually use in the community today. So shout out Gwinnett. And shout out Atlanta as well. We're doing it big here, and clearly you're not shy from being successful. Shout out to your parents for instilling good traits, good morals, good work ethic into you. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick your brain a little and start asking you like a slight political questions. Nothing too fancy, just I want to know who you are in depth, because a lot of people see vote for so-and-so, but who is that person? You go to a grocery store like us, you eat like us, you shit like us, you got family like us, so you are a human being. So I want to go ahead and get your perspective as a human being about certain issues. So the first question I have for you is, what do you consider to be the top 3 issues in your district? Now, if you don't mind, can you please go ahead and clarify for people that don't know what a district is and what that seat that you're wanting to fill in does for the district?
For sure. So City of Atlanta has 12 districts. This is for District 5. So you have 12 districts and you have your district reps, and then there's 3 at-large posts, and then city council president, and then mayor. So a district is essentially like the outline. Those lines change with every census. So we're about to go into what's the word I'm looking for? We're about to go into redistricting. So that'll change after not until the new council takes over, then we'll go into redistricting again and the lines will change. So for example, District 5 will actually get smaller because we've gotten denser. Some districts will get bigger, some will get smaller. 5 and 2 will most likely get smaller. And so what a council rep does is, I am actually excited that if I win, I would be able to represent District 5 because you actually have a constituent base. It becomes a lot harder for at-large posts because they don't, like, they're citywide. But basically what council does and what I would do is you oversee everything like, infrastructure, you oversee this, the council determines the city budget, They look over public safety, criminal justice reform, zoning, affordable housing, issues around rent, quality pedestrian and bicycling safety, basically any city utilities, anything that falls within the city's parameters and is run by the city council contributes to. So city pay, all of these things, workforce development, that's all council. So if you live in Atlanta, yeah, you might think a lot about federal seats and federal offices and all of that, but your day-to-day life, everything in your life is directly impacted by your municipal government. So oftentimes we'll pay attention to like who's running for president, or we'll pay attention to who's running for Congress, or, you know, all of these other things, but day-to-day life, municipal office, that has the greatest impact on you. The top 3 issues in District 5. Now, like these are the top 3 issues, but how they relate to each of the neighborhoods within the district, because we have a lot of neighborhoods in District 5, is different. So affordability, infrastructure and transit, and public safety are probably the biggest issues within the district, because I've knocked over 10,000 doors now, and that's what continuously comes up. And these are wide branching issues. So how affordability hits like Edgewood neighborhood is very different than how it hits Lake Claire. Infrastructure in Lake Claire is very different than infrastructure in East Atlanta. So it also has to take getting to know each neighborhood and each pocket of the district very well to know how it's going to impact each of them, because their concerns with infrastructure are all very different from each other. East Atlanta, you have all this green space that is under threat of development. Same thing with Lake Claire. You have the Lake Claire, majority of our canopy rests in Lake Claire. But then you also in Lake Claire, they're worried about DeKalb Avenue because it's a nightmare. East Atlanta, they're worried about developing these green spaces, and there's a lack of sidewalks and street lighting, and you have issues with protecting and having it like master plans, and you have these things called paper lots and paper streets that are popping up that are all big issues. And that's a whole nother conversation that would take us a long time. But those are like the 3 big issues, and they're big umbrella issues. Happy to go into detail if we get there, but I also break down all that detail on the website and in policy videos on Instagram.
I love that. So you're paying attention to key components per neighborhood. And that's important because, yeah, different topics. Obviously, the one that really affects everyone is shelter, right? Housing. So that is something that across the board, regardless of where you live, it's important. We all need shelter. And being able to afford that, I've struggled, and I'm very transparent about it. I've been homeless, I've struggled, and it's okay. But it's gotten to that point where, I want to be able to stay where I love to work and do community work, but can I afford it? So you're right. And also you're paying attention to different issues in different neighborhoods, because one neighborhood's issue might not be the others. So that's key. So thank you for that. That's very, very important. And right now we're all paying attention to what the candidates are saying, because it's important to us. Like you said, our day-to-day lives depend on the person that's in that seat to vouch for us, to voice for us, to listen to us, and to know our concerns. Sometimes we would like for you to know something that we can't tell you off the bat. Hey, I saw the problem, I'm here to fix it. We appreciate that. So someone that's informed of what they're doing, needing to know the information. So thank you. I want to ask you, what makes you want to do this job? Like, what's your motivation? A lot of people say, oh, it's been in my family for so long, and that's okay. Other people say, I woke up this morning and I was like, let me run, let me do this, let me do that. And it just was a spurt of motivation. But what is your motivation to do this?
It's probably going to be more of a long-winded answer, so I'll apologize ahead of time for that. It's kind of like that question of like when people are like, when did you get political? And it's like, I was born this way because of my identity. It's like you coming from an immigrant Mexican family, all of these things, like you were born political because our identities are inherently political in this environment. It's a white patriarchal society in the United States and the world period. But here in this country, our identities are very, very political. I was brought up, my father was a refugee from Iran. My family are all immigrants from Iran and Azerbaijan. My dad barely escaped with his life because he was fighting for democratic fair elections in Iran. He escaped here in 82, was almost deported, actually came in through Tijuana, met my mother, and a month later they got married. They were very poor, and they worked their butts off to make ends meet. So I mean, like my background is inherently political because of the family, because I'm a brown queer Muslim woman living in the South in the US. So I was born into this family. Like I got into politics at a young age because of my dad, because of my grandfather too, because of all my entire family, because my grandparents have a long history. They were revolutionaries in Azerbaijan and then revolutionaries in Iran, and were very politically engaged. So like I said, I started working in shelters in Atlanta when I was 5, started marching in the streets with my dad when I was about 8, and grew up working in downtown. And my dad was a farmer in Iran. And so when he in Iran, like if you can't afford medicine, similar to here now, but like there's a lot of malpractice. He grew up watching people die from malpractice because they didn't have accessibility to medicine. And so he said he opened up his pharmacy in downtown Atlanta for the same reason that he wanted to get into medicine in Iran, because he said he saw people dying from being poor. And so I grew up watching my dad, literally every unsheltered person on the street, he knew, and they knew him. They called him Doc. And he would stop. Like there was one man, I remember he had a homeless man, diabetes. So my dad was trying to help him from losing his foot. He would stop and unwrap his leg every day and clean it right there on the sidewalk. Ask him what he needed, do whatever he could. I would, a lot of the corners now, Piedmont by Georgia State has been completely developed. But back in the day, that was some of the worst sex and drug trafficking corners you would see in the city. And my dad would go out there. We go out there all the time, every weekend, hand out bread, hand out food. Which happened until someone stabbed another person over a loaf of bread. And then we started going through churches. But because my mom was like, you're not doing that anymore. So we started going through churches instead. But the founding, one of the biggest principles of the Islamic faith is public service. And that's very much what I was raised in. My dad always said, you treat others with respect that you would want, because you never know how far you are from rock bottom. And that's true, because when I was 18 and left home, kids don't leave their houses in our culture. That just doesn't happen. You stay home. And being a woman and leaving was considered, frankly, really slutty behavior. They saw it as me wanting to party and not wanting to respect my, my dad wanted me to stay home and I didn't want to stay. And so I lived out of my car. I lived on sofas. I worked a lot of jobs to make ends meet, to put myself through school. It was really, really difficult. I got assaulted a number of times because of it. I was mugged. I had lost my money on everything I had on more than one occasion. But I also learned, and I became better at the work that I was doing because I lived it. So public service for me was always my way of getting out of my head and out of my own way and out of my depressive states. So like it reminded me, like that was my religion. That was my faith. If I could go out and work, because I've now worked in crisis relief in 26 countries around the world. I've seen some of the most intense poverty you can possibly imagine. Worked in literal war zones. And for me, going out and doing volunteer work or doing acts of public service always got me out of feeling depressed. If I was down or something, doing an act of service would get me out of that, because it would remind me that what the bigger picture was. It would take me out of my own way and give me purpose again and put me back to work. Public service is all I've ever wanted to do. It's what makes me happiest. And that sounds cheesy. It sounds cliche. It sounds probably like a lie, but that's just always been it for me, because that's what I grew up doing with my dad. That was the one thing that my family and I connected on. Not because we weren't a big emotional family, but public service would always bring us together. So those traveling the world and a lot of times backpacking by myself and doing that work taught me a lot. Why I want to do it here in Atlanta. Like I actually never really wanted to run for office. I ran the first time in 2017 when the Muslim ban hit, and it quite frankly felt like this sense of urgency in wanting to protect my community and my family. The only way it felt like I could do that was by having a seat at the table in some sort in a municipal government, because there was no one that looked like us. There was no one that knew our issues. Council wasn't speaking out on any of the oppressive policies that were coming down the line. Nobody was talking about the urgency or the fear of what this new president was going to do, targeting Muslims, targeting minorities, coming after people of color. And nobody was saying anything about it or doing anything about it. It was still this mentality of like, not my lane, not my problem. And it's like, no, if you have the platform and the privilege of having a seat, then you utilize that to speak for community, your underrepresented communities, and you speak out against oppression. Even if you can't affect it from the legislative policy, it doesn't matter. You use your voice, always. And so I decided to jump in it and run because I've been doing mutual aid and policy work for so long, or mutual aid work in the city for so long, that the next step for me, besides just protecting my family, was like, okay, so we can affect legislative policy that can help thousands of people instead of 4 or 5 people at a time. Because that's what mutual aid work is. $3.99 fridge is dope, but we're only helping out handfuls of people at a time. But if we could affect the legislation to tackle these food deserts and food insecurity, then we could help thousands of people at a time. So that's why I want to do this work. It's because we have never had someone in office here in the city that thinks of our most underrepresented, under-resourced people first, and doesn't make the attempt to go to them, meet them where they are. We're really good at talking about people, but not talking to them. So that's why.
You know, as a young lady that's been out on my own at 16, I just appreciate where you come from. You know, I really do. It's not easy. It's not easy at all to just fight all odds and be successful. And you, my friend, have fought all odds. So kudos to you, Liliana. All your hard work, obviously, it comes from the love of your family. Your families, they're good people, to treat others that they don't even know with an open heart. So shout out to your parents again. It's important. I tell people all the time, family is very, very important. And a lot of people don't have family. So if you have it, don't take it for granted. Yeah. So I want to ask you, what do you bring to the table, to this job, that's unique to you? What makes Liliana unique? Like, let us know.
You know, what I've often found is that when I ran the first time in 2017, I was told that I was a disgrace for running. How dare I think I could challenge an incumbent or any of these things. The number of people that insulted, threatened. I actually had a stalker at one point in 2017 during this race. But it was very much this idea of like, you weren't born into this, you don't have the name, and you don't have money. So it made me an anomaly in city politics in a lot of ways. But, and I was also accused of running on identity politics because of my identity, because I was queer, Muslim, and a woman. And so like, that was like, people thought that's all I was running on, but that wasn't the case at all. Like, that's just what got published, and I can't dictate what papers use as their headline. That's not my choice. And it's so funny because like, people's identities are so often part of the conversation, but if you're a minority and you talk about your identity, then you're accused of just coasting on that. But my identity makes me everything that I am, because policy is shaped on subjective experiences. And if you hear that click clack in the background, that's just my giant dog walking around. Sorry about that. But that's based on subjective experience. And so like, I think one of the things that makes me very unique about in all of this is that like, up until now, we've always talked about politics like you have to have the background or be groomed for it. You have to have an Ivy League education. You have to come from the right family. People are so afraid of running and having their experiences, their trauma weaponized against them. They're like, no, I have too many skeletons in the closet. So does everyone else running for office. So does every other white man that's won a seat, but they're just affluent enough to hide their skeletons, or they're privileged enough to hide their skeletons. But you know, that tide is turning. We want to see people who've experienced things. We want people who know what it's like to be hungry, who've lived a medical bill or a paycheck away from the street, which is pretty much all of us at this point, who know what it's like to be homeless, who know what it's like to have to work 4 or 5 jobs, whether that's, at one point I was working service industry, working Zifty, and I had like 2 internships because I was trying to make ends meet. And I had so many jobs trying to put myself through school. I think some guy commented when I announced this time and was like, she's never been able to hold a job for a long period of time. She's never going to get things done in this office. And it was a white man. But the thing was, it's like contract work, it's gig work, but also being a queer brown woman, that people just think that because like, they think that these types of things don't still happen. But I was called so many slurs in the workplace for being queer. The last job I had, I was almost physically assaulted by someone on staff because he was mad that I corrected his transphobic language. And so like contract work, those types of things, point being, still facing that prejudice and those things even today. But what makes me different about all this is like, I don't know, public service is always what I've wanted to do. It's not about holding the seat. It's about being able to build a platform for intergenerational progress. It's about hoping that I can open the door behind me for people like us, for people like me that have never thought that they would ever have an opportunity to be an elected official and affect policy for the better so that their families can thrive and not just survive. What makes me different is, yeah, my background, it's my family, it's my identity, it's having lived these experiences. It's the fact that I've literally built everything that I am, and as great as my parents are, and my dad was my moral compass. My mom taught me to believe in myself, but they very much cut the cord very early on in my life, and everything I have, I've built up from nothing. And it's funny because you'll hear people, I've been accused so many times of so many people say I lie about my story, that what I'm saying isn't true, that I never really had it as bad as I've said, that I'm actually rich. That was my favorite one. That's been a new rumor this cycle, that I'm actually rich and I have an endowment. No. And it's okay, because I'm going to keep taking those punches, and I'm going to keep stepping forward, because I have a community that I've built around me, and the city has made me everything that I am. And the people supporting me I've gotten donations from $3, like from as low as $3 and as high as a max out. But a majority of the people donating to my campaign have all been under $100. And I'm out knocking on doors every single day. We've knocked over 10,000 doors. I'm going to knock 30,000 by election day. Called even more people than that. I've thrown 45 events this election cycle. What sets me apart is that I live this every single day, and that I'm never going to stop. Public service is all I've ever wanted to do. It's everything that I am. So I guess that's what sets me apart. At least that's my answer. So yeah.
Appreciate that. I'm over here taking notes as you're talking, because it's very empowering. It's a breath of fresh air to see a young lady also, get it out the mud and fight to get to where you're at. It's definitely not easy for us women. People say, oh, that was back in the day. No, it's still very much so alive right now, and we got to do our thing. I'm also referring to certain people that are privileged over others. That is very true. For the longest, we've seen that. Now, for the longest time, I was a full-on activist. I was angry as fuck, but I had to heal. Now, I was angry at all white people, and I say that with an open heart. I used to be angry at all white people, but I'm not angry at all white people. What happened in the past happened. We're feeling the repercussions of it, but not everybody's the same. There are good people out there. So not all white people are like, up on us. Some of them come from where we come from too. But you are right. There are certain people that are privileged over others, and they don't use their platform or their abilities to help us out here in the hoods to solve problems. So I will agree with you there. There's people out there that have the opportunity to help and they don't. So it's very enlightening, very nice to see you and all the work that you do in the community to help us. I want to ask you, why should we vote for you over the other candidates? What is Liliana's reason? Like, why should we vote for you over the others?
This is always like one of those tough questions, because this idea of like telling people why they should vote for me, I don't know. I have always made it like, I think that a campaign should be made bigger than any one person. So like, that's the point, because I don't want anyone to think that nobody should think that electing one person is the end all be all to solving things. And I think oftentimes in politics, we're like, I'm the answer, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And that's a lie, because no one person can do it. It takes a whole village. That being said, community building is what I've dedicated my life to. Networking, humanizing other perspectives, being able, you can be a policy wonk all day long, but if you aren't working to make that information accessible to everyone, and people talk about the MPU system, yeah, that's great, but do you know how many people are left out of the MPU system? Take a look. You and I sign on to all these neighborhood meetings. It is like 3% of the neighborhood that gets in on these meetings. And but they're all great. East Atlanta, I always feel for Sarah though, because the East Atlanta neighbor meetings, those neighborhood meetings go for 4 hours. But the thing is, they're not, we aren't doing a good job of making that accessible. If you're a single parent, if you're a student, if you're in the service industry, if you're working, those are not accessible, those are not accessible platforms. So being able to meet people where they are, when I win, my my goal is to also going to be building a communication infrastructure from the ground up, knocking doors year round, so that people are constantly engaged, because we have so many people leaving the community. It's so many new people coming in. And we also have a lot of seniors or people who are disabled or single parents that don't know what's happening in their community because they're too busy. And they shouldn't be punished for that. So also building a new infrastructure, so we're meeting people where they are. But again, why I think people should vote for me, other than the lived experience and understanding what our most under-resourced communities need, and the fact that I've been doing this work in Atlanta since I was in elementary school. It's not just like, I'm not new to this. It's not just like one day I decided I wanted a seat. It's not that at all. It's the fact that it's about knowing what mutual aid does, mutual aid work, which is my entire background, that and crisis relief work and nonprofit work, that comes in to fill in the gaps of government when the government fails to show up for its people. We have Free 99 Fridge, we have these other Neighbors in Need, all these other organizations that are filling the gaps because the city is failing them. And at the end of the day, legislation is what has the power to change that in a systemic way. It has a way to cut into all of these chronic issues that continue to debilitate people, that are trying to wealth build, that are trying to stand on their own 2 feet. We aren't setting up people to succeed in this city. We are the worst city to live in on minimum wage. We have a huge housing and renters crisis. We're building at a 20,000 unit deficit. We don't have the transportation or the infrastructure to support a growing city. Our city employees are being left out. If you're a whistleblower, you get fired. Our city employees are driving an hour to be here just to do this work. And so understanding all of that. And I've spent the last 4 years building relationships with all of council, with city commissioners, with our county commissioners in Fulton and DeKalb County. I have a relationship with the state house. In fact, I've been endorsed by almost the entire Atlanta delegation and then some. Including, I've also been endorsed by county commissioners. I've also been endorsed by people by the former superintendent of APS and the director of partnerships there. So I also have a great working relationship with our public school system. All of these things are needed for intergovernmental relationships to actually affect holistic policy. So like a council person cannot create legislation that will impact our public school system and they can't do healthcare, but you better damn well believe that a council person can tackle quality of life issues and do things like tackle food insecurity, and do things like tackle the wealth gap, and do things like create more broadband connections so kids aren't living in technological poverty. We can do things to close those opportunity gaps that we see in public schools. Council can do all of that. Council can build a relationship with our unions, who I've also been endorsed by, who can come into our public school systems and provide vocational training and career services, so that our kids, we cut into the school to prison pipeline, and our kids, especially our Black kids, can age here, our Black and brown kids can age here and be set up for success and actually be making $90,000 a year out of high school, doing something in carpentry or electrical work or concrete pouring, and be able to be making 6 figures 2 years after that. We can do all of this. But it takes knowing the community. And I don't just mean all of Atlanta. I mean, knowing in a district, knowing all of the different pockets, and making sure that you understand the issues that your community is facing, and then leveraging that to actually work with other partners, other agencies, other governmental offices to get the work done. You can't just keep to your own silo anymore. And that's the way Atlanta's been doing it. But that's why. I've already been doing this work, and I want to bring that experience to the table, and all the partners who've been helping me do it, and actually defer to the experts doing the work, take ego out of the situation, just get it done, because I already have that experience, and I want to leverage that, and I want to actually affect legislation that serves our most under-resourced first, so that there's a trickle-up effect.
And that's how it should be. Ultimately, I tell people all the time, your connections can help people around you, not just yourself. So the fact that you have been putting in the work, you have the connections, and you're wanting to bring that to our district to empower us, that's very nice. I want to go ahead and ask you, I'm very big on shout outs. Like House of Ramirez is built on like you said, it takes a village. So shout out to all the people that's holding me down to be here, to be able to do what I do. But now I want to give you my platform so you could go ahead and put the spotlight on people that's been holding you down in your personal life and in your career life. A short list, of course, but a shout out list. And also give us your social media, your website, so we could go ahead and follow you and support you.
Definitely my partner, Chris. Definitely Sarah, who you've seen with us. She's the one with the dope ass hair, who shows up everywhere with us, and the two of them have completely held me down and kept me sane throughout this process. My family, of course, but this community, like there's a community of us who have grown up in Atlanta, who've experienced during the recession, who experienced being broke and having absolutely nothing, and built up the DIY scene, the music scene here. We all helped build up the food service industry. And that entire community, we've been together. Like my friends, we've been broke together in Atlanta, living 9 of us to a house sometimes, trying to make ends meet. That community of folks who's been with me the last 12 years, 13 years, our DIY arts community, the queer community, the small business community, like those are people who took care of me when I had nothing. So always them, always. Oh, and one of the other things I wanted to say to that last question, I think one of the most important things that we fail to talk about is like our city government's very broken. We don't like to say that because it means that we're speaking negatively about our community. I'm not. That's just, you cannot walk into the seat disillusioned in any way, shape, or form. Things are very broken. And the stakes are extremely high right now because Atlanta is on the precipice of awesome change. But with that also comes the risk of doing it completely wrong. So the level of work that this seat is going to take, the level of presence, and most importantly, because it's nonpartisan, the level of accountability and accessibility and humanizing other people's perspectives when things are so divided, that's going to be super important. That's probably going to be the most important part of this, is like fighting apathy and getting people to invest in hope again, because we're surrounded by so much negativity. All right, so social media handles. All right, so LinkedIn, it's just my name, Liliana Bakhtiari, which is hard to spell. So let me spell it out for you. So Liliana, last name Bakhtiari, B as in boy, A-K-H, T as in Tom, I-A-R-I. And again, you're not going to come across another one of me because apparently I'm the only one on there. So under that name. And for Instagram, it's Liliana for Atlanta. So Liliana F-O-R Atlanta. Twitter, Liliana for ATL. Liliana FOR-ATL, and Facebook is just Liliana for Atlanta again. So we try to keep it pretty simple and consistent across the board. And yeah, I can be reached at any single one of those, any single one of those platforms. I will always respond, always accessible. So reach out anytime. Oh, email address, Liliana at Liliana for Atlanta. So again, Liliana at LilianaFORAtlanta.com. You want to get involved. So we have a postcard writing program. We're outdoor knocking. We're phone banking. We're doing all text banking, all of it. So if you want to volunteer, if you want to donate, if you want to learn more about the campaign, you can do that at www.lilianaforatlanta.com. Like I said, it's across the board, same thing. And so you can learn everything about the campaign there. My platform is up. If you want to donate, there's a donate link on there. If you want to learn how to volunteer, if you want to read more about my personal story, that's on there too. And if you're on Instagram, like I said, it's Liliana for Atlanta again on Instagram. We also post policy videos there and try to make them super understandable, because for those of us who don't have a background in policy making, city planning, all of that, we still deserve to know what the hell's going on. So I try to break it down in the ways that make sense to me, because I don't have a background in this. I just spend my time learning as much as I can. But that's also a privilege that not all of us have. So it's my job to try to make that information as accessible to those who don't have the same privilege as I do. So you can go to Instagram and learn more about our policies there.
Well, I appreciate you, Liliana. I'll go ahead and put the links below this video so everybody could go ahead and follow you. We're like kids, so we have like 3-second attention span. So as long as the links are below, y'all could go ahead and just click on them. Tune in, tap into what she got to offer, and read more about her. Contact her. She's very open to the community reaching out. So I want to thank you for just making the time out of your busy schedule to come on my show. It's the first time, it's not the last time. And until next time, sis.
Thanks, Leslie.
Make sure to follow House of Ramirez on all social media platforms.